We mentioned hundreds of thousands of votes still to be counted, including the key battleground states. The narrow margin in Georgia has pushed the state into a recount. In addition, some news agencies have called Arizona's 11 votes for Biden, while others regard the race as still too close to call. Our correspondent in Washington, Nina Maria Potts, joins us now. So, Nina, as we mentioned, differences of opinion, a lot of anxiety, a very victorious Joe Biden yesterday, but obviously nobody has called it yet. So let's look at the tally of the votes and the percentage points that matter.
Well, I can give you a swift update, a snapshot of where we are now. President Trump tweeting furiously this morning, his latest tweet claiming that he has won by a lot. He was seen leaving the White House dressed for golf. There's some speculation that he will be playing golf when the results actually come in. And we've got a string of results expected this morning. All eyes are on the big prize, which is Pennsylvania, worth 20 electoral college seats or votes. The ballot counting is going into its fourth day. We're still very much on a knife edge, as you said. And it's not at all clear what will happen in some states like Georgia, where the fraction of a percentage point has been swinging between Biden and Trump. Biden very closely in the lead, but as you rightly pointed out, a recount is in play in Georgia. And there may be a recount triggered in Pennsylvania if the percentage is narrow enough, although the numbers that have been coming in with these hundreds of thousands of votes that the ballots that are coming in, they've been tilting very much in Biden's favor at a ratio of 80% to 20%. So 80% of those votes have been going to Biden, 20% to President Trump. Arizona is still in play, as is Nevada. So, you know, those states which have been too close to call, still we haven't got a definitive word from the U.S. networks. The U.S. networks are the ones that call the result, call the winner, and they have been extremely cautious, and that is partly because the Biden camp does not want to claim victory unless it is absolutely certain. It does not want to give the Trump campaign any grounds to contest the result.
You know, I'm curious about something. I mean, looking at a state like Georgia, there have been two previous recounts there, and the most important thing is to understand, do recounts really matter? If there is a recount, is it going to change the story, the votes? And there's also the issue of duplicate mail-in orders, the contractors, mistakes that have been made. So talk to us a little bit more about what's coming out of there and how significant is this recount?
Well, there's a difference between the fact and the fiction, and the fact of previous recounts and the fact of, you know, previously contested outcomes and votes, and the narrative, the fictional narrative that President Trump has been propelling with the support of his base that believes that this election has been stolen. Narrowly on the recounts, you're quite right. They very often make no difference at all. And actually, the other state that has had two recounts within living memory is Wisconsin, and when they did the recounts, the results were exactly the same. So it's a very, very good point. Georgia is a little bit different because it is traditionally a Republican state. It's a red state, and officials in Georgia, especially on Trump's side of the aisle, are very keen to make sure that this recount happens. The Republicans have been complaining alongside, and this is the sort of fictional side of the equation, that they have not been given access to observe vote counting, and they are deploying teams insisting that there are reports of electoral fraud. However, we've even heard from a Trump advisor, an anonymous Trump advisor, saying that they have absolutely no evidence. They have no evidence of fraud at all. So although we've seen Republican local state parties, committees come out and talk about electoral fraud and sort of hint that they have had reports of vote tampering, they have yet to come up with any evidence at all.
So what has this resulted in for the Republicans and what's happening within the Trump camp itself? Because I've seen that there are divisions on how to strategize over this, especially with President Trump continuing to tweet falsehoods.
It's a very good question, and we're seeing reports that within the Trump campaign there's been a level of unprecedented chaos, and as we all know, it's been a relatively bumpy ride for the Trump campaign through the summer as the pandemic took hold. Some advisors believe that President Trump should go gracefully, and in fact we're seeing that increasingly among senior Republicans that are distancing themselves from President Trump, fairly disgusted about his attempts to disrupt the democratic process. President Trump himself is said to be very angry and absolutely committed and determined to continue litigating this until at least December. Others have observed that strategy itself is a way for him to concede without really conceding. In other words, to sort of back away from the presidency, sort of accept the result, not really accept the result, but to continue the fight. The problem with that is that it leads to a very explosive situation. If you look at the popular vote, Joe Biden has obviously overwhelmingly won it with 74 million people backing him, but President Trump still enjoys 70 million votes in this election, which is unprecedented. He grew his vote from 2016. And even if a portion of his supporters believe that the election has been stolen, I think we're looking at a very explosive situation here in the United States, which is why the Biden camp, why Joe Biden needs to be sure.
And I'm glad you raised that issue, Nina, because he sounded very victorious. He literally was a line short of declaring victory, because obviously, technically, he can't. So he can't call it. But I want to understand, what is the sense within the Biden camp? Is an announcement imminent? And does he feel like he enjoys a popular mandate, given the circumstances that you've mentioned?
Well, as to an imminent declaration of victory, if I had the answer to that, I'd be a billionaire by now, because we have been waiting for this for 4 days, and every day that comes we think he's going to announce, and of course every day that has passed we haven't been able to deliver that news. But I think the sense within the Biden camp has been one of confidence. We heard his tone last night in that speech. It was a tone of confidence, of calm. He sounded reassuring. He sounded presidential. It was a very cleverly crafted speech. He said that he hadn't won it yet, but he would win. So the message that they're trying to portray in the transition, or in claiming victory, is that although it's taken a while, they want to be sure he has upheld his pledge. He wants to be seen as holding his pledge and his commitment to the democratic process. However, that being said, Democrats are shaken. And if you listen to Democrats on social media, a lot of them are very shaken and upset by the realization that they have not won the moral victory, and that Trumpism lives on. And that, I think, has come as a shock to Democrats. And given the fact that the Senate still hangs in the balance, they haven't been able yet to claim the majority in the Senate, or to flip the Senate as they'd hoped. I think that Democrats are feeling battered and worried about how they really claim a mandate out of this election.
So just a quick and final question, Nina. Is there any protocol, even anything legal, constitutional, on conceding? I know that it's a polite thing to do, to call your opponent when you've lost and concede. He's very clearly said that he's going to dig in his heels. But is there any law compelling him to do that?
I think it's fairly unprecedented. I don't think we've ever seen a president that absolutely refuses to concede defeat. And I mean, I think It'll be very telling, these 12 lawsuits that the Trump campaign has filed, which have yet to gain any traction. If any of them manage to get to the courts, where does that land things then? It's a fairly unprecedented situation, but I think the point is that President Trump is angry, but he also feels, I think, very strongly that he has genuinely won a significant proportion of the vote, if not more. I mean, he keeps tweeting that he won by a lot. It's a very difficult situation for the transition. Remember, he is president until January. There's an awful lot that he can do between now and then. It's all pointing to a very, very bumpy and ugly transition. Joe Biden, who, as you know, has 40 years behind him in politics. He spent 40 years on Capitol Hill. He knows, every senator very well. He comes from a tradition, old school politics of bipartisanship, of persuading people from the other side to come along with him. The issue for the Democrats is that America no longer exists. It's a deeply polarized country. It's split in half. And Joe Biden's style of unifying the country is something that he may not be able to achieve.
All right, Nina, thank you so much. We'll catch up with you at a later stage and also speak to Sherwin Bryce Pease, my colleague who is in New York. Coming up after the break, we unpack that very question that Nina raised. Why is President Trump so angry? We'll be speaking to political analyst Lebohang Peku. Do stay with us.